got some positive updates around Brian Flores as it's looking like he has a good chance to stay in Minnesota as the defensive coordinator. These updates coming in from Ben Gessling, and we'll break them down on today's edition of Vikings Now by Chat Sports. And also later on today's show, what the Vikings can learn from the 2026 NFL playoffs. I got 4 takeaways I want to dive into on the tail half of today's show, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. But let's get into what Ben Gessling had to say. Ben Gessling on Brian Flores says, I would say probably more stays than leaves. I'm probably like 60-40 on this, just because I think the fact that he waited this out was for a reason. I think he does have a lot of intention to say, let's see what the market looks like. That could have a lot to do with where he ends up. But we'll see how the market shakes out for him. I think he may look at it and say, there's a lot of things in Minnesota that I have that I like. I like working with Kevin O'Connell. I like the way I get to shape the defense how I want. And, I do agree with Ben. Like, there is a lot to like from Brian Flores' perspective about the Minnesota Vikings. Like, he has a lot of roster control, which he might not necessarily get if he goes to another team, even if he decides to, go take the defensive coordinator position with the Dallas Cowboys. Like, is he going to have full control over the guys he wants to bring into the building? I would have my doubts there. But with the Vikings, he has brought in guys like Andrew Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman. He was very prominent on them bringing in Isaiah Rodgers this past offseason, and I'm sure he had a big say in a guy like Josh Metellus getting the extension he did this past offseason. And also him and Kevin O'Connell, he probably looks at it and says, hey, I got one of the best offensive play callers in the league, and I'm one of the best defensive play callers in the league, so that tandem can find some success. Now, Ben Gessling also had this to say, saying, I think they'd like to have wrapped that up by that point. It's the same thing where the advantage they have right now is time, because unless he takes a head coaching job, I don't believe he can talk to other teams until 10 days after the season. I don't know the language in his contract specifically, but that's typically how this works with contracts. There's a 10-day exclusive negotiating window for your current team before you can go on the open market. Head coaching things obviously change all of that. If he gets a head coaching interviews, he can take those at any point. But I think the Vikings would try to move quickly because they have this exclusive negotiating window at this point. Now, that's 100% true on Ben Gessling. So let's just play this hypothetical out that Brian Flores gets an interview with the Ravens, maybe gets an interview with the Las Vegas Raiders, for example. He doesn't end up getting those jobs. They go elsewhere. Then Brian Flores' contract expires. That negotiating window opens. The Minnesota Vikings have to attack that hard. Give Flores the contract he wants, because I promise you, if they try to stiff Flores with this contract and they say, hey, Flo, we'll give you around $4-5 million per year to be our defensive coordinator, and they don't offer him maybe the assistant head coaching position, I wonder if Brian Flores says, you know what, screw you guys. I'm going to go take an interview with the Cowboys for their defensive coordinator position, and maybe if Jerry Jones finally opens up the Brinks trucks and says, you know what, I got one of the best offenses in the league. I'm going to use all my resources this offseason on that side of the football, and I'll go hire the best defensive coordinator in football in Flores. Maybe Flores would have some interest. But there are right now 8 head coach openings in the NFL. We can chalk a lot of these off Flores' list. Obviously, the Miami Dolphins, for obvious reasons. The New York Giants, for obvious reasons. You can also probably cross off teams like the Atlanta Falcons, Arizona Cardinals. I don't think they'll retread with another defensive option. And I really think that leaves 2 main teams, the Ravens and the Raiders. Maybe a team like the Titans, maybe a team like the Browns, but I still have my doubts there that they would want to go Flores, as both those teams do have young quarterbacks. Now, Pelissero also had this to say on Brian Flores. He's focused on what potential head coaching opportunities could be out there. Once you get past that, let's see exactly how those other dominoes may fall. And I think Flores' agent, he deserves a massive raise from Flores this offseason, because they have all the leverage here. They have played this perfectly. You ride it out on your contract. The Vikings, even though they had a disastrous season, there is one thing that us fans and this whole organization can kind of hang their hats on, and that's his side of the football, the defense. They were a top 5 unit in the NFL, and in my opinion, they were a top 3 unit in the NFL the second half of the season. And with his contract up, he could go to the front office. He could go to this regime and say, hey, are you just going to let me walk out the door? I know that personnel on that side of the football. I know it's not to the level that where we could just get any defensive coordinator in here and they could have the same success. But as it stands right now, even though I don't have a lot of faith in the Wilfs, I think they're going to pay up because they need to. If they're serious about winning football games, if they're serious about contending in this loaded division with 3 elite offenses, you have to retain Brian Flores. But again, he has all the leverage. If they don't pay up what he wants, I could see him potentially looking at other options, this offseason. But I'll ask you guys this. Throw a number out there for us. What percent chance do you give Brian Flores to return to the Minnesota Vikings? I'm going to take Ben Gessling's answer here. I'm going to go 60%. I'm not 60-40 right now, which is a lot higher than I was. Now, I will say at the beginning of this offseason cycle, I was around 20%, got up to 40. I was at 50 over the last couple weeks. But as it stands right now, I'm probably around 60%, which, hopefully that's enough, to keep Brian Flores in Minnesota. But you guys, let me know your thoughts. What's percent chance do you give Brian Flores to return? Now we'll go over 4 things the Vikings can learn from the NFL playoffs just in a second, but I do want to tell you guys about today's sponsor, and that is PrizePicks. And now whether you're starting a new routine or making player picks for the first time, trying something new can be hard. But in life and on PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right. With high-pressure playoff matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night, the action never stops, and PrizePicks lets you take control. And PrizePicks has a brand new feature called Early Payouts. So, for example, if your player gets off to a hot start, you now have the option to cash out those winnings before the game even finishes. You guys can also find your community on PrizePicks. With the new social feeds feature, you can share PrizePicks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. Shout out to PrizePicks for sponsoring today's show. That link for that will be in the comment section and description of today's show. And if you guys download the PrizePicks app today, you guys can plug in promo code CLNS, get hooked up with $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Shout out to PrizePicks, though, for sponsoring today's edition of Vikings Now by Chat Sports. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. All right, so what can the Vikings learn from the 2026 playoffs so far? Obviously, we only have had wild card weekend, but I do think there's a lot of things the Vikings can learn. And number one, I think the NFC is wide open for years to come. Now, here are the final 4 in the NFC. You got 3 teams in the NFC West, that being the Niners, Seahawks, and Rams, and then our own division rival, the Chicago Bears. Now, with all these teams, I don't necessarily think they have elite sustained success, that's a tongue twister, for the future. San Francisco 49ers, they're an old, aging roster. The George Kittle torn Achilles puts a wrench in things. Now, yes, they have Shanahan. Maybe they keep Robert Saleh. I would probably guess that Saleh takes another head coaching job. But with Shanahan, they'll have some sort of success over the near future. Plus, they have the quarterback figured out. But it's not like the Niners where it's like, oh, they're the Buffalo Bills and they got Josh Allen. Or they're another team where it's like they got the franchise quarterback. So I think their success could be limited in the future. The Seattle Seahawks with Sam Darnold. We know who Sam Darnold is. Maybe he has a couple of down years. So that leaves the door open. The Los Angeles Rams. Now, I think even if they lose Matt Stafford here in the near future, still with Sean McVay, they will have some sort of long-term success. But point being here, there is no dominant powerhouse. The Eagles, for example, they look like they could have a lot of turnover this offseason. So it is a positive where it's like, hey, we don't have the Kansas City Chiefs where they're setting up for a dynasty for the next 5 years. Honestly, if I had to call one team in the NFC that could be a potential dynasty, hate to say it, it would be the Bears. Great head coach, great quarterback, franchise tight end. If they just get better defensively, they could be a problem for the near future. Now, I also think number 2, it's an obvious one. You need a franchise quarterback. No matter how good your team is, no matter how good your coaching staff is, you got to have that guy. And I think last year with Jalen Hurts winning that Super Bowl, I think it was an outlier because think about that Eagles team last year. They had the best defense in the league. They had the best offensive line in the league. They had the best wide receiver room in the league. They had Saquon Barkley having one of the best running back seasons we have ever seen in the NFL. So you need a franchise quarterback. You look at the QBs remaining in the playoffs, Sam Darnold's playing at a top 10 level. Same with Stafford. Brock Purdy's been fantastic this year. We have seen that Caleb Williams jump. Josh Allen is one of the best football players I've ever seen. Bo Nix, now he's a question mark. I still think he's had a good enough season where he is playing at a top 15, top 18 level, but he's got, again, one of the best defenses in the league, elite coaching staff, and then Drake May looks like he could be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. And then the other 2 teams, Aaron Rodgers or C.J. Stroud, Stroud's got 2 playoff wins. Rodgers, obviously, know his type of success he's had in the NFL. Question becomes now with the Minnesota Vikings is, do you get ultra aggressive and you look for an immediate upgrade at the quarterback position? Do you go all in out of Joe Burrow? If Lamar Jackson's available, do you go after him? Do you maybe try to pry Baker Mayfield away from the Buccaneers? Or do you just sit back, develop J.J. McCarthy this offseason, and hope he develops at a fast enough level where you're saying, hey, we can get McCarthy to the point where he's playing top 8, top 12 quarterback in the league play. And still with this team, with this coaching staff, if you get top 12 QB play with JJ still on a rookie deal, then the Vikings could be set up for a whole lot of success this next offseason. So it really depends on what the Vikings think. You go get that immediate upgrade, or do you bank on J.J. McCarthy taking massive, massive strides this offseason, and also him just staying healthy this next year? Now, also number 3, this is obvious, pass protection is key. Now, one of the old age sayings in gambling, especially in playoff time in the NFL, you never bet on a bad offensive line on the road. And I think that was on full display last night during the Chargers and Patriots game. Even a quarterback like Justin Herbert, where, again, I think almost people are now overreacting to Justin Herbert, where they're saying, oh, he is, maybe not as good as we thought he was. I still think he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. His offensive line is just literally the worst in the National Football League and gave him no chance. If you don't have an offensive line, if you can't develop that position group, you got no chance to win in the playoffs, especially on your road. If you're on the road with the crowd noise, it's just tougher to protect up front. And then also number 4, another obvious one, but this really does matter. Coaching matters. Like, you need to have an elite play caller on both sides of the ball. You look at all these teams, they either have a ton of experience on their offensive side with their coaches or their defensive side, but most likely they have both. And I thought that was on full display in the Eagles-Niners game. The Eagles, if you flipped coaching staffs in this game and you gave Shanahan the Eagles roster and you gave Nick Sirianni the Niners roster, this game would have been 48-0. Like, I understand the Eagles have a very good team, but the biggest difference in this game was the coaching staff. Like, it's not like Brock Purdy played a perfect game. He threw 2 interceptions. But we saw Shanahan manipulate the game, elite clock management, just hitting that trick play in a big-time spot. Coaching matters a whole lot, and that is a positive for the Vikings if they are if they are able to keep Flores, got an elite head coach. Still, in my opinion, then you also still have an elite defensive coordinator. So I'll ask you guys this. What's your biggest takeaway from the NFL playoffs so far, and what can the Vikings learn from the NFL playoffs? Drop that take down below in the comment section. Also, hit that subscribe button on your way out. Closing in here on 69,000 subscribers. So if you guys aren't subscribed yet, change it. Hit that subscribe button today. Daily videos around your favorite football team. And we'll get on out of here. As always, let's go Vikes.